Hello everyone and welcome to Cumberland, British Columbia, home of Forbidden. We are out here to ride two of their newest bikes, the Druid Core and Druid Lite. These are two different travel range bikes featuring the DJI Avinox M1 drive system and of course their high pivot witchcraft. Oh god, this trail's fast. Oh yeah. Oh my god. All right, so to get the day started, we have our lovely tour guide, Matt, here. Can you give us a rundown of what we're gonna be doing today?
Yeah, sure thing, Cole. So today we're gonna be testing out both the Druid Lite and the Druid Core here in the Cumberland Forest. We'll start out on the Druid Lite and we'll ride some trails that are suited to this, more kind of blue flow into some faster type terrain. Nothing too chunky, but definitely enough to test out the high pivot layout and see how our geometry works. And then after that, we'll refuel, coffee, cookies, donuts, whatever you want. And we'll jump on the Core and we'll go and ride another area in the network that's more known for high speed, chunky terrain, which is where these bikes really shine. And it's a big part of the reason why these bikes are designed the way they are, because we test the bikes here and it's the terrain we like riding, so we want the bikes to perform the way we want them to perform.
So behind all this high pivot witchcraft is the DJI Avinox M1 Drive Unit. This motor is one of the most powerful motors on the market. Currently in its new updated form, you can opt for the full 1000 watts of peak power and 120 Newton meters of torque. So with that said, there's plenty of power to be on tap, but one of the cool things with that DJI system is you can go in just on the bike, you don't need an app or anything, and really tune the motor to fit your riding style and parameters. For us, we have down-tuned it to keep it more reasonable for trail pedaling. I think a lot of the users that are really interested in all that power, you're really only gonna make use of it on fire roads, and even at that, it's still a lot. All right, so the first bike we're gonna be riding today is the Druid Lite. This is a 140 rear, 150 front with that DJI Avinox Drive Unit and a 600 watt-hour battery. Those are the biggest differentiations between the two bikes, and yeah, I think it's about time we get out on trail and let this thing eat. Zipping up the first little climb here. I'm noticing right away how upright the climb position is. Turbo is still absolutely ludicrous on straightaway climbs. It is hilariously fast. Surprising how well it wheelie turns around those tight corners, the long back end. All right, Core Lite. Immediate feel is great corner traction. Feels a little long out back, but it's to be expected until I'm used to it, right? But very centered on the bike and the weight distribution. Pretty active, but very compliant for 140 up back. It is taking some getting used to dive it into corners, but the weight balance is very neutral and centered. Starting to get a little bit more comfortable with how the bike turns. You can really ride way more off the back than I originally had anticipated. And the bike really, really likes that. You have a huge window of where you can put your body weight and kind of not get penalized for it. All right, about halfway through the morning here on the Druid Lite. Matt, who would you say the Druid Lite is for?
I'd say the Druid Lite is for anybody who's looking for a lightweight, full power bike that has a super natural on-trail feel. It's pretty hard to tell that it is an e-bike until you start going up the hill and you're using the assist and you're like, okay, this is definitely an e-bike.
And just so I'm correct, it only ships with the 600 battery, but you can also opt aftermarket to get an 800?
Correct, yeah. The Lite is shipped with the 600, but it's the same frame. So if you did want to get the extended range, you could go for the 800. And yeah, there's no problem. It fits right in the frame.
Cool, well, sweet. Back to the trails. As we're getting into some steeper, loose climbs, there is a buttload of traction to be had out back. that longer rear center, proportional to the reach. It takes a little bit more time to get used to than other more traditionally sized bikes, but the payoff in the end is when things get steeper, don't really run out of traction. The bike is handling all this really light rock chatter very well. That actually moment just reminded me, one thing I'm finding is because the back is as long as it is, which is great in theory, if you get a little over the front, get a little too far over the front, you do pay a little bit of a price in loss of traction. Ooh, changes direction pretty dang good for being long out back. Not mad about that at all. There may be some background noise. We are in an active bike shop. We are being those people in the bike shop, taking up space, talking about bikes, but hey, it's worth it because this is a pretty unique bike you guys have created. When developing this, coming from the analog version, what made you decide on some of the numbers on the Lite version of the Druid E?
Right, so the Druid Lite isn't just a case of us putting a motor in the Druid. That's fairly obvious based on the way it looks, the geo, but what we wanted to do was preserve the Druid's on-trail characteristics. So that's why this bike has similar travel numbers, a little more travel than our acoustic Druid, but with the motor, you don't need to worry about carting around a little bit of extra travel. There's not really a downside to it, but we didn't want to go crazy. We wanted to maintain that characteristic. So this bike is lighter than the core, just under 46 pounds.
Special numbers here.
Just in case
Yeah.
I got it wrong. And it has a more lively feel on the trails than the core, a little more active. You're getting a little bit more sensation through the bike. And then the changes in the geo come from the longer fork.
I'm Ollie, a design engineer here at Forbidden Bike.
The most commonly asked question we see is the geo and tall stack, shorter reach, how does it ride? Like, what does it feel like? Can you give us a little insight into your ethos behind the geo algorithm that you guys have created for the high pivot witchcraft?
If you're talking about size, we consider size to be the distance between your feet and your hands. And to simplify that into a geometry chart, or how we design bikes, we say it's the distance from the center of the BB to the top of the head tube. Those distances between a Druid V2 and the Druid E's are the same. But to achieve that same number, that consistent number, you have to, because we've risen the stack, you have to then pull the reach back. Because it's like, it's like the radius of a circle where the center of that circle is the bottom bracket. So you start lifting up the BB. So yeah, that's essentially the simple science behind it, really.
Can you give us kind of the rundown on the trifecta system for those that are unfamiliar with it?
We have axle path, which is high pivot, and given as that axle path as one key point. Then we have traction, which is related to the leverage ratio, and then efficiency, which is pedal kickback, and that is associated with, on these high pivot bikes, where you locate that idler. So we kind of hone in on each of those points to give us the trifecta package we want from that bike in that category. One of the changes you'll see from a Druid V2 is that we've gone with a more linearly progressive leverage ratio. So that just means that it's consistent throughout the travel range, which is something we found to be really helpful with an e-bike platform. Previously, we've used we have that little spike at the end of our leverage curve to help with bottom out control, whereas advancements in shock technology and bottom out control built in, there's less necessity for us to do that. We're not saying we're not looking at overall progression at all, but there's less necessity for the leverage curve to be compensating for that aspect of it. So the shocks now have either hydraulic bottom out or some bottom out bumpers. So they're kind of taking control of that, which means that we can hone in on the mid-stroke and get that portion of the travel dialed, because
Where
that's
we
where you
spend
need
most of it.
support,
Yeah.
you need sensitivity for traction. That's where that all comes into play.
All right, out on the core, lots of traction. Steep sections of climb like that is where that longer rear center really pays dividends. Wow. That's wild. Damn. That's wild. All right. First moments aboard the core. Wow. You can definitely feel that little bit of extra travel, both front and rear. Oh, that was not the line. As we're getting into a gnarlier trail here, you can definitely, oh, just like that, find myself getting away with a lot more on this bike than the Lite. I'm getting more comfortable on the core. Oh God, this trail's fast. You can definitely feel the extra oomph when it comes to downhill capabilities. The Zab and Vivid combo. Honestly, I feel the weight of the bike more than I was expecting. Yo!
All right, so we just finished up our second ride of the day on the bigger travel Druid Core E. I think one of the big questions I had when looking at the line was, okay, you have a 140 rear and a 150 rear, they're both Druids. Why keep them so close? You know, what was the ideation behind this bike specifically with this travel number?
Right, yeah, so this bike, what we wanted to do was keep it within the Druid family and to have those ride characteristics. So something that punches above its weight and is a trail bike, not like a full-on enduro machine.
It's only 10 mil more, but with the higher volume shock, more oil in the fork, stiffer front end, and this definitely was the better option for that trail. You could ride it on the other one for sure. You can really feel yourself getting away with a lot more on the trail. I mean, like, am I on a trail bike? Like the trail we just rode, very steep, very chunky.
The frames on the Core and the Lite are identical. All we've done is change the shock and the fork and the battery.
And the idea of having the 800 in this longer travel version was like, okay, this is more of self-shuttle, gonna go up and try and find some more gnarly terrain.
For this bike, we're thinking people are gonna be doing steeper climbs, probably more sustained, and up to trails where there is sustained descents as well. So with the bigger battery, you can get away with that, do more of it, and have the bike that's gonna be well suited to get you down those trails and have the most fun.
With that rearward axle pass, does most of that happen at the beginning of the travel?
Yes, it's only at the very end of the suspension travel that the wheel starts to move vertically. So it's not like some of our acoustic bikes, which have a complete rearward axle path. You're still getting all of the benefits of the bike becoming more stable as it's going through rough terrain. Both the Core and the Lite have a much taller front end, a lot of stack. So you see those shorter reach numbers.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed was how I wasn't wishing for taller stack, which is very, very common for me, being taller, wanting to get the bars up. And I found not only the climbing position to be really comfortable, but when it was getting rowdier, when we started pointing down some of that gnarlier stuff, that I was in a very commanding position with my elbows up. And to touch on the climbing side on this, the longer than traditional rear ends, combined with that rearward axle path, the amount of traction and lack of wheel lift on those really steep bits was pretty eye-opening. And for me, being someone that struggles in those zones, it was rewarding for me to stay centered on the bike, not have to be all hunched over and try and keep that wheel down. The rear end is quite a bit longer than most bikes on the market now. Do you do that in combination with that rearward axle path?
Yeah.
Do you do that to keep the rider's weight centered or to make it better climbing? What is the kind of ideation behind such a long rear end?
The front center and rear center give that a ratio, essentially. So these bikes are 1.8 to 1. If that makes sense. That ratio is then seen across every single size.
Sure.
So as the front center grows, the rear center is growing at a similar rate to maintain that ratio.
Got it. Okay, so I made a post on the Instagrams to get a bunch of questions from you guys to kind of go over some individual questions and thoughts you had about these bikes and if they're gonna be for you. So we're just gonna run through some of them. Don't take these answers as set in stone. This is my personal opinion on your questions. Availability in the USA. We are looking late July, August timeframe for these to be landing in your local bike shops. We got a pretty in-depth question here from Andy DeVault. Really excited to learn more about this bike. I'm a bigger guy, 6 foot, 220, kitted up, currently ride a Crestline with a Gen 4 race motor. Loved it, but love to hear your thoughts on the Core versus the Crestline, also versus the new Levo. Size recommendation for a 6 foot rider, and is 150 mil enough in the back for gnarlier terrain? Okay, Core versus Crestline. Crestline, that was my favorite bike from the shootout, which hopefully that video's out now. I'm not giving away any secrets. They are very different. The Crestline feels much shorter out back and is easier to flick around and change directions on flatter terrain. You can definitely tell through some of the really higher speed rough stuff that 180 mil on the Crestline does shine through over the 150 on the Core model. But with that said, the 150 is a big jump up from the 140 on the Lite, and that all has to do with the Vivid shock out back. It's enough, it for sure is enough. Maybe if you're constantly riding huge big hit terrain, you might want to opt for more travel, but generally speaking, I don't think the 150 is going to hold you back. We rode DC-DH yesterday, which is pretty heavy hitting fast trail, and I definitely wasn't wishing I had more travel. I was wishing maybe for some more setup time. You know, we have limited time on these bikes. So I'd say setup is more important than that final travel number. As a 6 foot guy, definitely S3. I'm 6'1" with long arms, long legs, and the cockpit feel, on-bike feel was dialed for me. Yeah, their amalgamation of geo is really interesting. They're measuring from center of your steer to your bottom bracket, and that's kind of where they look at height, and the proportions grow with each size. I believe it was 17 mil rear end growth between each size. So they're really catering each bike size to a given rider. Your take on short reach, high stack would be appreciated. As someone that has a really high saddle height, I struggle with a lot of hand pain on climbs with shorter stacks, and then compensating with taller bars, and then I'm losing front end grip. So for me, their algorithm of what they're doing with geometry works well. I think it takes more time to get used to a bike like that than a more traditional geo set. And I think especially with the longer rear end, where your weight is, it's like very centered on the bike. So you have a lot of room to go forward and back with your body position on the trail. How does it compare to the Norco Sight VLT? Great question. That is actually a really good comparison to this bike. Different drive units, similar ideation of high pivot in that 150 mil range, or sorry, 140 mil range. The Norco Sight is more playful. Hands down, it is snappy around corners, almost to the point of losing traction is something I was struggling with that bike at our shootout. Longer rear end on this, loads more traction climbing and loads more descending. A little bit harder to predict on flat corners with the longer rear end on this bike, specifically the Druid Lite over that Sight VLT. This feels like it has more travel. One of the things I noticed on the Sight, and Drew also mentioned this, is we were getting kind of a weird spike near bottom out at the end of the stroke that was kind of harsh, and I did not have any harshness at all. Like, it was zero harshness whatsoever on this platform. And yeah, I think the biggest thing overall is you're looking at these two bikes. Do you want to jump and play and jib more than you want kind of more plush traction, speed focused, with still the ability to play, albeit with more body English? Some differentiations there. Does it beat current bikes in the market? It's different. It's its own thing. I like it. I really want more time on it in different terrain, but it was super fun on those kind of blue tech flow trails. I didn't have a problem doing cutties and turning about. did take me longer and still not completely comfortable with how it corners because of that longer rear end, but that only comes with time. It's just a very different bike, and if you are looking for something with that longer wheelbase, with more ability to really use your body weight on the bike and not be so narrowly focused on the shorter rear end and where your body has to be, it is a bike to keep in consideration. If you can get on one, even if it's not an e-bike, get on one of their other analog bikes. It will give you an idea of their philosophy. Well, everyone, that takes care of it. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video and learn more about the Druid line of e-bikes. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments below. I'll be sure to answer in the best way I can. If not, I will refer to Forbidden for anything I do not know. And yeah, that's about it. Until next time, we'll catch you on the trails.